Hey YouTube, Steel Ovan here. So Zachary Witt, I hope I'm saying your name correctly, made a video request for beater knives. So I really appreciate you giving me a video suggestion. All suggestions are welcome. If any of you have video suggestion ideas, leave them in the comments below. So here is one of my beater knives. Just kidding. The polished zirconium and expensive Damascus are not something that I will beat on. It is over in the realm of functional art, and I don't feel like jacking up a $900 pocket knife for something like scraping paint off of a brick. Here's an example of a beater knife. Now, a beater knife to me is something that you don't think twice about having to redo an edge on or destroying the finish. So for things like cutting against metal, abrasive surfaces like concrete, bricks, sandpaper, cutting against ceramics like cutting up food on a ceramic plate, cutting in stone or muddy, cutting in dirty areas. Those are all things that will permanently damage your edge, like dull your edge, chip your edge, and you will have to resharpen after that. And to me, a beater knife is something that you don't think twice before cutting against or around those things, because you don't mind having to resharpen it, or refinish it, or you just don't care about the finish. So you'll notice these knives are in all different price ranges. Price really doesn't have much to do with it, at least for me. So this is the first one. This is a Spyderco Dragonfly 2 in H1 steel. This one I throw in my swim trunks when I'm at the beach and use for all sorts of tasks because it essentially doesn't rust. You can see there's heavy scratching on the blade from cutting sandpaper and fishing line and whatnot. So there's one of my beater knives. I'm actually impressed by how clean the yellow plastic is. I would think there would be more black and gunk on it for the amount I use it, but surprisingly not. So one of my beater knives is a Dragonfly 2. That one I'll grab and do just about anything with. Another one, this Opinel number 8. I've done some mods to it. And it's a $12 knife, so if anything happens to it, I will just throw it away and make another one. I mean, anything really bad, like you get, dunk it in glue or, who knows, lose it. That's another good definition of a beater knife. Something you wouldn't mind if you had to lose or throw away. Discard after use. So throwaway knives. Now some of these knives I wouldn't put into that category, but they are things I wouldn't hesitate to use for any task. So there's an Opinel number 8. This is a great cheap beater knife, and everybody pretty much knows about how great they are. Here's a little bit more expensive one. This is a ProTech TR3, and this is basically my beater Sebenza. It's cheaper than a Sebenza. It's got titanium handles and a nice frame lock. You can see the blade's been used heavily, scratched up, smudged, and the pocket clip and handle as well. This is one of those knives that I will not hesitate to cut sandpaper, drywall, whatever with, and I don't mind resharpening. So that is a good beater knife for me. Another beater knife. This one also happens to be cheap. This is a flea market knife made in Brazil. I don't actually know the model name, but this one I lent to my brother. Another definition of a good beater knife is there's no problem loaning it to someone who you don't know what their intention is. So he took this camping and was chopping in the woods, and you can see there, absolutely destroyed the edge, chopping rocks. I'm not sure what he was thinking, but I repaired the edge as best I could. Yeah, that's better light there. You can see there and there. So a lot of knives you don't mind lending out that could be destroyed. So there's another, it's a beater chopping fixed blade. Another fixed blade I'll use for absolutely anything. This Mora. See the scratches on the blade, same deal. I will do anything with this knife. It's probably a $12 knife, so if I had to throw it away, it goes in that category. Great beater knife. Now, this is not a budget knife video necessarily, like I've stated. Some of these knives are expensive, and I wouldn't necessarily throw away, but I still would classify them as beater knives because I do not much care how they are used or what happens to them during use. So this more I've used on everything. Camping, cutting plastic, you name it, scraping things. I keep this one in my car and keep it sharp as best I can, but it gets used for everything. So there's that. Here is a fixed blade, first fixed blade I ever made. You can see the sheath's getting beat up. I've been using this one at work. You can see the patina and the scratching forming on the blade. This micarta has, the edges have all softened as they've gotten worn away with time. This edge has been resharpened at least twice now. And you can see the use on there. So this is another knife that I made, and I have no qualms about doing anything with this knife because A, I'm testing my heat treat and my blade that I made. So it gives me a good data point for what it can and can't do. And I don't feel bad about abusing this one a little bit. So there's another good beater knife for me. Here's one that's really cool. This is my first construction knife. I do carpentry, construction of all sorts. And this is a knife that I've had for about 3 years and have retired, but haven't gotten rid of it yet. You can see how scratched. When this came, this was polished. The edges were all sharp. This is a cheap mechanics knife, I think probably 14, 15 bucks. And before I was even heavily into knives. And you can see over 3 years how much I've beaten on this thing. The wood edges have all been worn smooth. The screws have all been stripped. This, the pivot was stripped, and I took a Dremel to it so I could tighten it. And I tightened it as much as I could, and even still, it has insane, I don't think the camera's even picking up how much wiggle is in this thing. It's like half an inch side to side play. And that's with it fully tightened down. So the pivot's stripped out, missing a screw here on the lock bar, but still somehow it functions-ish. The pocket clip, it was tipped down. I used it until all 3 screws stripped out. Then I took a Dremel to it, made the screws flathead, and tapped it for a tip up, which is super dangerous because the detent is non-existent. Look at that detent. Beautiful. Actually nothing there. Technically it is still a knife and you could put a blade in it. I, however, have long discontinued this in use because I just don't trust it. And I have better options now. So you can see on the wood there's paint, glue, carve marks. I believe that was from a grinder actually. Like this thing has been through absolute heck. It has been through hundreds and hundreds of blade changes. And I'm talking hundreds of blade changes. Over 3 years, working full time, you go through at least 1 blade a day. Usually, if you're doing something like drywall, you're going through 3, 4, or more. So this knife, for what it is, has held up insanely. $14 knife from a local hardware store. This is what I would consider definitely a beater knife. A cheap one, but it has lasted. It has put up with the beating. The pocket clip is floating. No retention whatsoever. And actually my taps seem to be holding good, so the pocket clip doesn't have any wiggle. But it did before it would go off the handle practically before. See the junk in here. This one I would say is this is the ultimate beat knife of mine. This one has been through absolute heck and back, and that's why I still have it. I appreciate the work that it's done for me, even though it is not a really quality piece of equipment. So here's another one. This is the last one of mine I'm going to show. This is an XM18. Recently I've started carrying this one, and once again I put this in this category of I do not care how it gets used, why it gets used, and I'm intending to abuse the edge and continue to resharpen it along with the micarta and everything else. So, and this is a $400 knife. So once again, back to it doesn't have to be this isn't the best budget knives. This is just the knives that I personally would beat on out of the knives that I have. Now don't get me wrong, all of the knives that I have, I will cut things with. Certain knives, I will think twice before I cut something against something that will damage the edge. Like I said before, super abrasive, something that will screw up the finish or damage the edge beyond repair. Well, easy repair, I should say. So, there's the XM18. You guys have seen that one a lot. Now, next, I have some guest blades, quote unquote, guest blades. These I borrowed from my brother. He is also in the trades, and he is not into knives as much as I am. He carries, one knife a day, but has several, and he carries it over years and months. This is a very well-loved PM2. I actually gave this to him for Christmas, and I am bewildered how it still has a point. But this is dull as a brick. I'm sure it's been dull for a very long time. You can see the G10 is worn all the way around. No longer sharp, but absolutely smooth. The clip is floating, needs some work, and has a lot of movement in it. Lock up, and look at all that junk on the edge. So this one's been used. I'd say I would call this a beater knife, but I don't think he beats on this necessarily. I think this is just how he uses his pocket knife. Look at the scratches on the clip there. So there's that one. Cool guest blade. Appreciate him letting me show it for the video. One of his beater knives. And now check this one out. This one is beat. This is definitely a beater knife for him. He has had this one for years and carried it as his only knife for years. And you can see it's been sharpened. The edge is starting to recurve. The finish is wearing off. There's paint. All the finish is worn off and scratched off. Off center, crazily, but still fires. Still actually has a reasonably good lockup. So this one has definitely withstood the test of time. This is a Boker Kalashnikov. I don't think I mentioned that. Kalashnikov 74, as you can see there. So there's the two of his beater knives that I just wanted to show you guys, because they have some pretty impressive wear. This one isn't showing up as well on camera as this one does, since it has the finishes. But there you go. I don't even want to know how many times this one's been fired and closed again. And the spring's still pretty good. So, Zachary, I really appreciate you requesting a video like this. This was fun to do. I'd appreciate it if more of you guys have video suggestions of things you want to see. It gives me purpose in these videos. So leave a comment down with what you guys would like to see next, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. Bye now.